Hello friends and welcome to Figure Study, where it feels kind of quaint to have the camera this close to something. Today we're finally taking a look at a figure that I had for a bit and then got rid of and missed and got back again and realized I never actually made a video on it, so fixing that now. That figure being, obviously, Revenge of the Fallen Lockdown. And this figure definitely has its issues, but it is also really, really neat. So to start, let's just take a minute to appreciate the absolute majesty of this vehicle mode. If you ignore all the overcompensating Mad Max stuff on the outside, the actual contours of the underlying vehicle are really, really nice. It's almost got a bit of a, I want to say a little bit of a Corvette Stingray kind of vibe, particularly in how the front of the hood section flares up a little bit. Also, if you're looking at it from certain angles, in particular when you take in the green into account, it almost gives it kind of like a hooded cobra vibe with the way it kind of tapers in and then flares back out. I know I'm stretching, it's definitely more of an abstract shape, but it does kind of have that vibe to it. But I think the car looks really good. Again, the lines and contours of the vehicle are really nice. And then you've got all this fun, jagged-edged, spiky stuff all over the place. And most of it is painted. I also like the two-tone green that they've got going for the deco on top, where the lines along the edges are a little bit brighter, and then stripe going down the middle is a little bit darker. And I also appreciate the fact that they went with like a more really, really dark brown for the car color rather than black. It works well with the green and the orange for the windows, and also it allows the black plastic for the wheels to stand out a little bit better. And it just works with the silver and gold detailing. And from all angles, this thing looks really nice. You could probably do with a little bit more detailing up here that's painted in. I could do that myself, but like you can see, there's a little bit more detailing up here and up here. From the front, it looks great with this orange translucent plastic for the headlights and this very aggressive looking, almost cowcatcher-like fender. And of course, along the top, there's that green detailing, which again works really nicely with the orange around back. There's even some nice painted details with red for the taillights, some kind of coppery gold color for the exhausts, silver for these spikes. Looks so good. But yes, Lockdown's vehicle mode, particularly for the Revenge of the Fallen line, is very, very cool. I love this thing. It's actually, I think, my favorite of his two modes, which is saying something because I always prefer the robot modes. And his robot mode is really cool, which we will see in a minute, but I really, really like this vehicle mode. It's so over the top, but kind of perfect. Now let's readjust things a little bit so we can do some size comparisons, because you know we've got to do that. Here's Lockdown with the standard deluxe squad, and this I think is kind of fun. If you look at him next to Downshift. Downshift is ultimately a bigger car in virtually every respect. Just keep that in mind, because things are going to look a little bit different when we get to the robot modes. I mean, everyone watching this probably knows exactly what's coming, but I still think it's neat. And here's Lockdown with the duck tank. Okay, let's just preemptively raise this up. It is time to turn this into a robot. So I'm gonna do my best. The transformation on this guy is a little bit clunky in places, and it's extremely easy to pop the arms off. Fingers crossed I don't actually manage to do that, but we'll see what happens. So here we go. And here we've got Revenge of the Fallen Lockdown in his robot mode. This is a heck of a robot mode. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love it, but it is kind of a lot. But then again, it's Lockdown. Lockdown is kind of extra by default, right? And yeah, there are so many things that I actually think are really, really cool about this robot mode. First off, he doesn't really have much in the way of kibble. Like, he's got a couple of car bits hanging off of him, but given his whole asymmetrical slapped together aesthetic, it kind of works in his favor. I also like how so much of the car is just his shins and feet and a little bit of his chest. Like there's a little bit along the back, and again, these flaps, but it spreads out in a very interesting way, and you're left with a very, very interesting looking robot. I think his proportions are a lot of fun, how he's got these extremely thin, weedy limbs, and again, there's that asymmetry all over the place. Like, both of his arms are drastically different, both in terms of the way that the shoulder armor kind of plays together and the kibble on the arms. Like, this arm has the gigantic hook and this big kibble panel up on the side, and then this arm has the engine and no kibble panel on the side, but then has this kind of shoulder pauldron cloak thing hanging off of it, and it's just weird, and I love it. Really, if anything, I'm kind of disappointed that they didn't carry that asymmetry down into the legs. I mean, they did a little bit, but primarily the shin sections, I feel like it would have been cool if they had figured out a way to make these a little more asymmetrical. You get a little bit of asymmetry in the thighs, though. Like, you can see the molding here and here is different. And it looks like the molding of these inner pieces are also a little different. And that includes the Mecha Live thing that they used to do with this line, where you rotate the thigh and you can see that gray piece spinning, which is fine. I don't dislike it. I don't think it takes anything away from the figure, really, but it's just kind of like, yeah, whatever. But I do appreciate that they at least carried a little more of that asymmetry into the legs. But again, it would have been nice if they'd done the lower legs. As far as the colors go, I actually think it's really kind of interesting what they ended up doing, because now they brought in a little bit more of that light green in the kind of waist section, so it works with what's going on here. But then for the dark green, you've got a little bit in the shins and a little bit in the torso, which is carried over from the roof of the car mode. And I also like that they used black plastic in addition to the really dark brown. And it's hard to see unless you're looking at it under the right lighting conditions, but like the midsection, the car bits, the actual head and neck, that's like that dark brown. But then the thighs, the knees, or what counts as knees, the arms, in particular the forearms here and the bicep here, because this bicep is not, are in black plastic. And again, for that asymmetry, you've got different colored biceps. And yeah, it works really well. This is a messy looking robot, but that's the whole point, and I really, really love it for that. There's also some other really nice details, like his hand having these extremely slender claw-like fingers. The detailing on the hand is really nice with those little knuckle spikes. And I like the creepy, weedy fingers because it goes with the creepy, weedy looking arms. And then on this hand, you've got the extremely unnecessarily large hook that is barbed on the inside too. That's pretty vicious. And when this moves, which is hard to do when it's transformed, but with this out of the way, when this moves, you can see that little hydraulic piston moving, which is really cool. I don't really know what else to say about this robot mode. It just looks really good. He wears his kibble well because it's locked down. It's kind of like, it's intentional, I think. And the design is absolutely bonkers, but in the best possible ways. Now that head is also a thing, my goodness. It's kind of, from what I understand, it's very like animated lockdown, which I don't really have that much familiarity with, but I'll take everyone's word for it. And he's got like this extremely thick neck that practically doesn't exist, and this almost gas mask-like face, which is also picked out really nicely with the silver spikes on the side, the silver for the face, and that light green for the head crest. It's got some really nice light piping, which is kind of... I feel like even under these lighting conditions, you can almost see the eyes glowing, which is a testament to how well it works on this guy. Normally, I actually detest light piping, but I do like it on lockdown, and I feel like even when he doesn't have enough light coming in, it works because those eyes do stand out from the rest of the head, even without light behind them. Now, in terms of articulation, the head is on a combination of ball joint and stalk, I think, like a hinge, so it can shift up and down quite a bit. You get, depending on where the head is positioned, you get some up and down motion, you get some tilt, and you get a little bit of turn. So there's that, and the head, as we saw, can hunch down or stretch way up. There's this section, which is also on a ball joint, so that can move up and down and pseudo-rotate a little bit. And then this section at the base can rotate. So lockdown can he can move his head in a lot of interesting ways, and it is kind of unnerving, but that's kind of the point, you know? Now, for the rest of the articulation, that is where the disappointment comes in, because it's a bit hampered. Also going to have to do both arms separately because the asymmetry means the articulation is actually different between them. Both shoulders have this hinge going into a ball joint, but the range you get kind of differs depending on the arm because of the setup of the shoulders. Like this one goes up slightly higher than this one. You don't really get any worthwhile butterfly motion on this arm, but you do on this arm because of the way the ball joint's set up. The arm on this side can go down about this far unless you use that hinge joint there, so you can bring the arm down further. You get a bicep swivel just above the elbow because the elbow is a ball joint, and then the arm can bend significantly less than 90 degrees. And the hook can't really move at all. You can bend it in if you want, but that's more for the transformation, and you can bend it down, but you have to swivel this panel out of the way to get it to do that. This arm, you have the ball joint for the elbow again, but it is a little bit hampered because of the panel in the back here, and the panel is attached back here. This bit can fold up, so that doesn't really help much. You can rotate it a bit. It's strange. And yeah, the elbow can move up and down, can move around, and this gets 90 degrees of bend as opposed to the other arm, which gets definitely not 90. And then the hand can't move up, down, or turn, but you can turn it in for the transformation. Also, I need to tighten the ball joints on his arms. They're a little loose. You don't get a waist swivel, which I think is fine considering the way this thing transforms. You can kind of use a pseudo ab crunch because of the way it transforms, though, so there is that. The hip articulation is also, it just kind of depends on the leg because you can go forward that far, hold still. You can go forward that far, back that far, and things start crashing into each other, and out that far, which that's pretty good. You can move the wheel out of the way, but it actually gets in the way more, so I'm just gonna leave it like that. This leg is more hampered because of the asymmetry brought about by this whole thing, because you can see part of the back of the car is up here, but not here. So when we look at the kind of butt flap thing, you can see that the car bit stops here, but then continues on this side, and that definitely gets in the way of the right leg. So you get pretty much the same forward and backward range, and if you think the range is because of this thing, now when you bring the pelvis forward, like that's as far back as either leg's gonna go, just because of the construction. But what stinks is the outward motion on this leg because it's just not gonna happen because the wheel is gonna crash into this thing. You can move the wheel out, but that doesn't help either. So you practically get no outward movement on this leg unless you raise it up first and bring it out. Which can be done, but yeah, that kind of stinks. Now, the rest of the leg stuff is the same the rest of the way down, thankfully. So it is, you've got a thigh swivel on both legs, which does the Mecha Live thing on either one. The sculpting is different, but it moves the same. Then you've got this multi-hinged knee that can go forward and backward, and you can get basically 90 degrees. You can do the chicken leg thing. You can go forward a lot. It also has technically ankle tilt, not really, but this bit does move in and out, so you can give him a flat stance. The feet do not tilt, but you can move them up and down if you wanted. He's got some pretty decent articulation in very specific ways. For what he is and for what he does, it's fine. Like, it absolutely would be nice if the articulation was better, but I really do like how you've got a very over-the-top but symmetrical car that turns into a also very over-the-top but also very asymmetrical robot mode. It's a really neat design. And even with that limited articulation, you can get pretty darn expressive with him. And this guy is just neat. And it's not quite sure the best way to show this because Lockdown's height is so variable. Because of the way that the legs work and the way that the head works, this is how I prefer to have Lockdown, where he's a little bit kind of hunched and giving him that kind of chicken leg look, because I just think that looks cool. But if you wanted to, you could stretch out those knee joints to make him significantly taller and stretch up the neck. So now he goes from, I mean, still tall, but relatively stumpy looking fellow to the Transformers version of Slender Man. Like, just to give you an idea before we bring in all the size comparison proper stuff, like here's Lockdown fully stretched out next to a deluxe, and then if we squinch him back down, yes, squinch is a real word, I insist that it's a real word, and if we squash him back down, he is still a lot taller than a deluxe, but like also not quite as alarmingly tall as he is when he's fully stretched out. So yeah, there's a lot of variability with Lockdown's height. But I'm just gonna leave him like this. He's still quite tall, but just know that if you fully stretch out his joints, which in my opinion doesn't look quite as good, he does get probably a good inch, maybe even 1.5 inches to 2 inches taller. Anyway, let's get this out of the way, move you over, and do some proper size comparisons. Here's Lockdown with the standard deluxe squad, which, I mean, no surprise because we already saw this, but just to give you another idea of how really tall and lanky this guy becomes. Like, this is a deluxe, I think. Car mode is actually smaller than downshift, and now we've got this much taller robot, which, yes, admittedly lankier too, but much taller. Unfortunately, I no longer have Reveal the Shield lug nuts. Kind of wish I'd hung on to that guy, but yeah, since I don't have lug nut anymore, we'll just have to make do with the duck tank. And that is gonna do it for Revenge of the Fallen Lockdown. This is a really, really cool figure. I did not care for Lockdown in Age of Extinction very much, but this is fun, and I think it's cool how they tried to take basically animated Lockdown's really strange and unorthodox, but in a good way, robot mode design and figure out a way to make it work from like a live action aesthetic standpoint. Yeah, it stinks that the articulation is a bit limited due to the construction, but I'm ultimately okay with that. He's just neat. But regardless, that has been my look at Revenge of the Fallen Lockdown, and this guy is very cool. I am extremely glad I got my hands on him again, and I never should have gotten rid of him in the first place, but hey, we all learn from our mistakes, right? Sometimes I learn anyway. What are your thoughts on Lockdown, be it the Revenge of the Fallen version, or the Age of Extinction version, or the animated version, or any combination of those? Whatever your thoughts, feel free to chime in down below. I always enjoy hearing from you all. If you like this video or any of the other videos that I've done and want to support the channel in addition to watching videos in the first place, I do have a Patreon. It's a single $1 tier that gets you early access to new videos, access to the occasional behind-the-scenes posts that I might make, and fingers crossed, when enough people join up, I'm going to start doing polls every now and then. So if you want to have any kind of feedback on the direction of the channel, possible future topics, that kind of thing, that's an option for you. But with all that out of the way, thank you everybody for watching, and remember, highly abstracted art is more than meets the eye.